Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 721 of the Juicebox Podcast. On today's program, I'll be speaking with Cutter, who has had diabetes most of his life, honestly. We talk about everything. I mean, nothing gets left out, from what insulin he's using to stories involving the police getting called and everything in between. You're going to enjoy Cutter. While you're listening today, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Have type 1 diabetes or are the caregiver of someone with type 1? Head over to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Fill out the survey. Help people living with type 1. Help yourself. Help the podcast. Takes fewer than 10 minutes. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. You know, I've been toying with getting away from the word / just saying slash. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, though. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. What do you think? Let me know. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast has two sponsors. The first one is Omnipod, makers of the Omnipod DASH, the Omnipod 5, and they also have a little thing where you might be eligible for a free 30-day supply of the Omnipod 5. So, that's pretty cool. You should check that out. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Today's podcast is also sponsored by the blood glucose meter that just got used in this house about 45 seconds ago. The Contour Next One blood glucose meter. Go check it out at contournext.com/juicebox. You deserve an accurate meter.
Hey, Scott, my name is Cutter. I have been a type 1 diabetic for, hard to say this, 51 years now. I was diagnosed at the age of 2, and I'm 53 now, so that's where we're at.
Wow, 1970?
Yes, sir, 1970.
Wow, that's crazy. Also, I was born in 71, so that wasn't difficult for me.
Oh, you're my little sister's age, so okay, it's all good.
I know. Well, it's funny. I'm the oldest. I never even think of myself as like someone's little anything. You know what I mean? I don't get to think
for sure.
Wow.
Real quickly for you, just interesting backstory on that. My dad was also a T1D, and he was diagnosed when he was 18. So fast forward to 1970, and as a 2-year-old, I'm apparently wetting the bed to an amount that's impressive for an adult. And my dad said, he's diabetic. And my pediatrician told my dad not to get crazy and not to start thinking big just because he was a T1D. And they gave me a blood sugar, and it was 600. Wow. And the doctor never doubted my dad again.
How old do you think your father was at that point?
Well, he's 25 years older than me, so he would have been 27.
Wow. Okay. 27. So he had a baby at 25, and 2 years later, it's happening all over again. How Go, please.
No. I was his second. I'm the middle. So, okay. Back then things were different. He had his first one at 23 and a half. But yes, it was 25.
Needed to get you guys working.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak too much about somebody who can't speak for themselves, but how did his life with diabetes go? Is he with us still, or did he have trouble?
No, he's not. And that's what's interesting. So many things have changed in my lifetime. I thought my dad was a very physical guy. He owned his own construction firm. He was good about health. He was great about that stuff, but he didn't have the education I grew up with. I grew up doing urine tests with a chemistry set, and my dad was before me. So he unfortunately had a bad ride about the last 9 years of his life, and all of the complications you're told will happen did happen, and he ended up passing in 2000 2000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it's okay. It happens.
No, 2000. How old was he when he passed?
57.
No kidding. Wow. Okay. And it's funny. I was just, Jenny and I recorded yesterday, and I remember saying to her that, just having had diabetes Jenny's had it for 33 years. She's pretty much lived through every modern version of care, but you've got 17 years on her. That's astounding.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I have so many stories, but I keep in mind, I came along when we first had urine testing, where people won't understand this, but we had a little chemistry set with a small test tube and a dropper and some pills, and you would mix ratios of, I believe it was like 3 drops of urine to 10 drops of water, put in a pill, shake it up, and watch the colors change. But the only problem with that is that the urine coming out of your body is like 6 hours old. So any blood test you were getting, you had to do super math for, and then blood testing systems came out, and then CGMs came out, and now powdered insulin, which is rocking my world. So yeah, we have seen some amazing things.
Yeah, no kidding. It's funny too, is your perspective is kind of extra. I think it's extra interesting because 50 years, but you're only not much older.
53.
Yeah. Like it's like, usually when you meet somebody who says, I've had diabetes for 50 years, they often are in their 70s. And yours is very uncommon. Okay. All right. So what is your first kind of like remembrance around diabetes? Like at what age do you think you start to remember it?
I don't have a great memory, but because I've had it since 2 and nobody remembers things at 2, it's been my whole life. So for me, I've got a lot of different stories, but for me, I guess the thing that I do think about the most, I have really bad lows, and I have experienced some really bad lows over the years. Part of having it this long, as you know, is oftentimes you can get unawareness. So I will regularly be when I say regularly, often, sometimes, I'll be at 50 talking to you like I'm talking to you right now.
Right. But you don't have any feeling, not even like that, like odd, I'm going to be lower feeling, or nothing at all.
Nope. I mean, it depends. Everything varies.
Really?
It's day to day. But just on Saturday night, I had a phone call with another T1D friend of mine, and he was at 43. And we were talking like you and I are talking right now. So it just happens. The only problem is when you have unawareness, you go from fine at 50 and next thing you know, you're 35, and you can't fake it through 35.
Yeah. And for clarity, you're not faking it at 50. It's just you have no symptoms whatsoever, even when other people witness you. So you've been in a situation where somebody else is with you, you're 50, and they don't know there's anything wrong.
No, I will say, yes, that is true. But oftentimes I do have some tells, and I think everybody has their own. But if I start to not understand you, if I'm working with you or something, and you have to repeat a simple process 2 times, that's when people are generally, hey, you need some sugar. You okay?
Okay. So you have a deficit. You're just unaware of it.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Sir. Okay. All right. I understand. Okay. But then the next problem is that the step after that, going lower, is incapacitation of some kind and an inability to help yourself. And so you don't know that's happening. So CGM technology must be, I mean, if I ask you to put them all in order, this is the greatest thing that's happened in your life?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That, and I don't know, because I'm new to I don't want to name any brands, but the inhalable insulin it feels to me like the biggest thing that's ever happened. But CGMs are amazing. Ever since I've had my CGM, those super lows rarely happen now.
That's excellent. Now, when we can say, I don't mind you saying, so you mean I don't know how they say
yes, it. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's it. It's a Freza.
Yeah. And it's just like you huff it. It's just like in an inhaler, right?
That's all. Like somebody that has asthma, you inhale it through your mouth and it gets into your blood. And forgive me, I'm not exceptionally technical with all of the stuff, but it's mind blowing. You know how when fast acting insulin, I grew up on beef and pork insulin, which was the animal insulin, and that takes a while to get working in your body. Then they came up with human insulin, and we thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And now Afrezza, this stuff, you suck it down, your blood sugar lowers in like 30 minutes. It's mind-boggling.
How long have you been using it?
I've only been using it about a month, so I'm still in the honeymoon phase right now.
Oh, yeah. I have to tell you, Cutter, like the reason it doesn't come up on the podcast more often is because it's fairly new in the life of a drug, and it's inhalable, and that throws me for a loop. Like I don't say there's anything wrong with it. I'm not saying it's going to hurt anybody. I obviously don't know. I'm not a doctor. I certainly haven't studied inhalable insulin, but it's enough of a brain worm to pause you when you think about it. Like, wow, you're going to inhale it. It's going to go in through your lungs. Like, is that okay long term? And I'm sure they have data, over many years now. But I think that the bottom line is that would be a tough lift for me to turn to my daughter and say, hey, inhale this. And so in my mind, until there's way more time, I guess, with people using it, I would have a hard time suggesting to my daughter to use it, but I understand why anybody would. I mean, the idea that like you basically have a high blood sugar that with a liquid insulin, you'd have a tough time bringing down, and you just kind of like puff this stuff, and a half an hour later, your blood sugar is stable. It doesn't get lower. It just goes to where you kind of more want it to be, or can it get low?
Well, oh, no, for sure it can. And I'm finding, and first of all, let me get back to, I don't think that your fear is unfounded. And in fact, I think it's pretty smart. I think I also had the same concerns. I have a circle of T1D friends that I've known forever. And whenever something like this does come up, or a new treatment or whatever, I'll talk to them, because I think I'm like you. I'm the guy that's 10th in line. I'm not the guy that's first generally. Yeah. And I spoke to two of my friends about it, and they talked about it like I'm speaking to you about it right now.
Right.
And because I have such faith in them, I was like, oh, okay, I'll give this a try. And I have loved it. Now, neither of them know either about the long-term effects. Sure. But they're both super educated guys, and I took their faith. I took their word on faith, and it has worked out so far for me.
I wish you a lot of luck with it. So you're just basically shooting a basal insulin and then using the inhalable for meals and corrections. Is that right?
Yes, sir. But I also do take Admelog too. I still inject. Oh. It's just that the Afrezza for me is more of like you suggest, an immediate meal thing. If I'm going to have a meal, they come in 3 different doses. I sound like a spokesman for Afrezza, but they come in 3 different doses. Each, there's 3 different cartridges, strengths, 12 units, 8 units, and 4 units. Mm-hmm. And I was advised, and this is a little bit of a mind bump, that they're about half as strong as liquid insulin, meaning when you take an 8 unit dose, you're only taking 4 units of injectable insulin. I will tell you from my perspective, that doesn't work that way for me. My body chemistry appears to be that 8 feels like 10.
Oh, wow.
It is super powerful for me, but that may not be the case for everyone.
Interesting. Do you take it before you eat, like in a pre-bolusing situation, or do you take it as you eat or after? How does that work?
I take it right before. Like if I'm going to eat, let's say we're eating at noon, we sit down at the table, I'll huff it at noon, and then the food comes, but you have to, it's not like the injectable insulin. We're used to that, people that inject, taking your insulin right at the top before you eat. And even then you're going to be behind. And this stuff, it starts working in 15 minutes. I mean, crazy working.
Okay.
And I don't mean that to scare people. I'm just saying, if you take it at noon and you're not eating until 12:30, that's going to cause an issue.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, that's very interesting. I appreciate you explaining that to me. Yeah. And I appreciate you having perspective of what seems so impactful. Tell me, and we'll get past this then, but when you say it's impactful, it's not because you're not injecting, right? It's the speed that it works at. Is that what you find?
Exactly. Great question.
Okay.
Because people since then have found out, oh, you must be so excited. You don't have to take shots anymore. I don't care about shots. Shots are my life. I don't feel shots. So that's not a big deal. But exactly what you're saying, being able to take it at noon and have it work within 15, 20 minutes, that's mind blowing for me.
I understand. I really do. Okay. Well, you've said a couple of times just in a short amount of time that you have a lot of stories. And I feel like there's a reason that you reached out initially. What's when you first reached out, you had a problem with law enforcement? Am I remembering this correctly?
Yes, sir. You most certainly are. First of all, I just want to say that my respect for the police is through the roof, as I know yours is.
Yeah.
I am not here to speak negatively of the police. That is not what I mean at all. But I think training for people that are professionals in that regard really needs to pick up. Very long time, not very long time, about 20 years ago. I had a low blood sugar here in my apartment, and it was one of those where what we talked about earlier, I was 60, and then next thing I knew, I was 30, and I was in trouble, and it was just one of those perfect storms where I didn't have anything in the house. We've all been there. So I decided to get into my car and drive down to the gas station and get a Coke or something. I got into my car, I pulled out of my parking space and realized at that point, dude, you should not be driving. I live in a very busy area, so my parking space was taken before I was even out of it. And so I turned off the car. I said, you know what? This is a problem. If I drive, I'm in trouble. I don't want to hurt anybody. So I'll just turn off the car and someone will help me. Next thing I know, I'm on my face in a pool of blood. And I apparently had gotten so low, I passed out in the car. Somebody called 911. The police showed up, and not knowing any better, even though I was wearing a bracelet, they took me out of the car, must have quizzed me or whatever. I obviously didn't pass any test.
Yeah.
Then they handcuffed me behind my back and let me go. And I blacked out, fell face first, landed on my forehead, the top of my nose, my upper lip, and was out. Fast forward a couple minutes, one of my neighbors, good friend of mine, is coming down the sidewalk, sees me in the pool of blood, and starts screaming. He's like, what happened? What happened? Well, all the officers were together, talking, trying to find out what to do. And they told him, stay away. He's under the effect of either alcohol or drugs, back off. And he said, he's a diabetic. And the officer said, well, how are we supposed to know that? And my friend said, you had to move his medical alert bracelet to cuff him. And so they then this is a great dramatic story 20 years later, but then one of the officers came over and apparently felt my neck and said to the other police officers, I'm not getting a pulse. Well, he just must have not felt it. So my friend starts going crazy. The ambulance comes. I have a pulse. I'm okay. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of physical damage done as a result of that. I
imagine falling forward on your face without protecting yourself is not great at all. Wow. Do you remember any of the situation? Do you have any conscious memory of it?
I don't. I remember waking up in the hospital being surprised, being like, what happened? I knew I had the low, but I didn't recall it at the time. It was, imagine blinking your eyes and opening them up in a hospital room. It was that fast. It was crazy.
Right. And you were obviously low enough when you thought to get into your car that more common sense ideas, like I could knock on my neighbor's door and ask them for something. Like you were beyond being able to make those decisions at that point.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I just figure. And again, keep in mind, I think I'm okay.
Okay.
I know I'm low, but I think I'm like, oh, I can get down to the gas station. I do it all the time. Right. And yeah.
So, wow, that's crazy. Also, Cutter, you're only like 2 years older than me. If you keep calling me sir, it's going to freak me out.
I'm sorry. It's a term of respect.
I know it is, but I don't deserve your respect like that. Okay, so what happens after something like that? Does someone apologize, or does it just do people act like it doesn't happen? Is there any, I mean, this is 20 some years ago, right? But still.
Yeah, no, there is no apology. And I understand, I don't know how I feel about it, but there is no apology. It involves taking it to court is what it involves. And, I think an apology would have worked. But so no, there was no apology. There was no reaching out. In fact, what I was even more surprised by, no police officer came to the hospital after and I don't mean to visit me. I mean to follow the ambulance and find out what happened to me. And that was a little bit weird.
Yeah. So I feel like you were about to say something and you stopped yourself. Were you going to say, I can kind of understand not apologizing because then it's admitting liability and it opens you up further?
Well, I just mean, now, again, this is 20 years ago. We live in a world today where a policeman can't look at you without getting a complaint. And I get that. But I think they deal with so many things. Yes, the short point is, yes, you're right. I believe that if you do admit you're wrong, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of trouble. So, yes, I agree with you. Thank you.
No, it's a weird position. It's funny. You're so, like, you have a lot of hindsight on the situation, obviously. Because you're very even-minded about it, even just when you're explaining what's happening. Like, because you can really, like, you could flip around to the other side and say, I wonder how many, inebriated people that they deal with in a day, and you probably looked exactly like all of them, and it probably just becomes commonplace for them. It's, I hate to say it, but their jobs are probably no different than somebody who works on an assembly line after a while. I mean, it shouldn't be like that, but I can see how it could get like that.
And that's the example I always give. Perfect example you gave. I always say I was probably the 100th drunk guy they arrested that day. Yeah. So yes, I agree with you.
That's crazy. I appreciate you sharing that.
But they missed the bracelet.
Yeah. I know.
How do you, they had to, my friend was right. They had to move the bracelet to handcuff me. And that's what angered me.
Yeah, no, listen, any way you decide to feel after this is over is completely justified. You've got carte blanche to feel any way you do. So what did you end up doing, or did you do nothing?
No, I'm not really at liberty to discuss it, but it did go to court, and my medical issues were all covered.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's fair to say that after you do something like this with the municipality, at some point when it comes to a resolution, you agree not to talk about it publicly, like with detail?
Well, I had signed, and I mean, I know it's a long, long time ago, but I had signed an NDA, so I'm not going to name anybody or any. Truth be told, I don't know any names.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to understand what the hesitation was, but that makes sense.
Oh, yes, sir. That was it. That's the reason for the hesitation.
Cutter, I signed so many NDAs in the course of the year. There are times when I'm talking and I'm like, I'll say out loud, I'm like, I'm not even sure I'm allowed to say this. So I know how you feel.
I'm with you.
It's very it really does stop you in your tracks. You're like, I think I agreed legally not to mention this. So no,
it's been what, 23 years now for that event. So I'm like, if they want to come after me, I hope they don't, but I think we're okay.
No, I think you explained that. I mean, you didn't listen. We don't know where you live. You didn't use anybody's name. Yeah. I think you're safe. Although it would be partially horrifying and partially hilarious if they came back to you after a podcast. And they're like, "We need that money back now."
I'd be like, "Yeah, good luck. Here's a rock. Squeeze it.
See if you can't get blood out of this stone."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Why do you have such a good attitude about all this, do you think?
I think it's because I'm lucky that I've had it since I was 2 years old. I always say it's the only life I've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends. I have a dear friend who got it when he was 10. And that to me is scary because if I had, and I know that at 10 you can absorb anything, but if I had 10 years previous to that of eating normal and just being normal, let's say, to have to make that change at the age of 10 or 13 or whenever you have to make it, I consider myself super lucky because it's the only thing I've ever known.
I understand. I really do. I often think that my daughter might benefit from that. She was also diagnosed at 2. So,
oh, great.
Yeah. I also, I often think like, cause she's got a very matter of fact attitude about diabetes. In fact, there's an episode with her, the very first time she ever came on here and people really got to hear, I mean, she's 17 and also just very, I don't know, she's very matter of fact about having diabetes. And,
oh, that is so awesome. And I'm sorry that happened to you, but, and look at me, 51 years. If you saw me on the street, you would have no idea. My doctors say that I'm in great, incredible shape, and I have not always been the super diabetic. And truth be told, I certainly am not now. But if I can make it this far with all of the extra things we have, your daughter's going to live to be 190. Wow. Because I have not been good about it. And it's so great that with everything that they have now.
It is certainly interesting how it can almost like a tornado, like, pass one house and go to the next one kind of thing. Like somebody like you can say, oh, I did all right, but I wasn't always great and I'm fine. And there are other people who can have your same exact story and they're devastated, like physically. It really is, boy, it seems kind of random coming out of that old time management style. Like some people it just worked for them. And, I don't know. It's fascinating to me that everybody can have such different, I don't know, outcomes coming through something.
Yeah. And you know what? Thank you for making that point because you're right. Just because I've turned out okay doesn't mean that I don't have a twin, but doesn't mean that my twin brother would too.
Yeah.
You're right. Everybody's different.
Are you married or have you been? Do you have children?
I'm not. Nope. I am single, lifelong bachelor. So I don't have any of that.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering if we would see more diabetes in your family line going forward. Do you have any other autoimmune issues besides type 1?
Yes. I also have gluten.
Celiac.
Celiac. Yes, sir. I also have celiac, which I've been told is related to T1D.
Well, yeah, it's an autoimmune disease, and they do sometimes seem like they travel in groups or pairs at the very least. Do you abide a gluten-free diet, or how do you?
Yes, I certainly do. I do. I was diagnosed probably about 8 years ago. I had dropped about 40 pounds and thought, uh-oh, I've got something. This is it. It's the end. And I went to a bunch of different doctors. And in college, that's 25 years ago, a college doctor had told me, I think you're allergic to wheat. And because I was in college and knew everything about the universe, I laughed and said, come on, man, I eat sandwiches all the time.
Right.
And fast forward 20 years and a doctor said, no, you're definitely allergic to wheat. They did the tests and all that. So, yeah.
When you were younger, what kind of an impact did it have on was it like, or does it take hindsight now of being gluten-free to see what was happening, or were you?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I had gluten. People with celiac, it's a lot like T1D, where different people can have different experiences. And again, please keep in mind, I might be wrong here, so forgive me if I am.
You're fine.
One of the side effects of celiac disease is something called dermatitis herpetiformis, which is outbreaks that you have. And I started getting those as a kid, and they can be on your face, they can be on your arms. And as a teenager, that's a nightmare. But it was a result of the celiac disease. So that was interesting to find out. So that was the biggest problem for me as a kid. I didn't have any gastrointestinal problems. Some people eat wheat and they feel it right away and they get really sick. I don't have any of that. I could eat a full pizza right now and I wouldn't feel it. I'm very fortunate.
Okay. I'm not finding the syndrome that you're talking about though. I must
dermatitis herpetitis. It's just, I mean, we called it a rash growing up. And again, I could be wrong about the technical term of it, but or the scientific name of it. It's like little, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I guess like poison ivy or bubbles that then if they break, they turn into a sore. It is not a pretty side effect.
And you have it when you're exposed to gluten?
Yeah, and I haven't had it for, 8 or 9 years now, but I had it from up until I was 9 years ago. Okay. And not all the time, not every single day, but it would come in batches. And because it was from wheat, well, there's gluten in everything. So I couldn't make a rhyme or reason. I would travel through life and I would say, all right, you know what? I'm going to stop drinking beer because maybe it's beer. And then I would stop drinking beer and it would go away and I would think, oh, hey, it was beer. And then it would come back and I would think, well, maybe it's carrots. I had no idea. It was trial and error the whole way.
Yeah, there's too much data, too many different possible variables. You would never have known to just eliminate an entire section of like gluten, something that covers so many different foods and drinks and everything. I see. Well, that's interesting. And so what happened is, what made you finally listen to the doctor? Age
and the weight loss in all. And he was a super great doctor. I'll tell you, I told him, I said, man, over the last 30 years, I have heard everything. And he said, well, what have you heard? And I listed off the things, and I don't remember in what order or whatever, but I said, the punchline was, I even had one guy tell me I was allergic to wheat. You believe that? And he was a dermatologist. He grinned a little bit and he's like, I think there's some weight there. And then we did the test and all of that. So by me saying that, cut out probably, I don't even know how long of trial and error from the physician.
Yeah. Well, so the weight loss, I mean, you lose that much weight, you think, oh God, I have cancer, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah. And then you're just like, I just can't eat bread anymore. And perfect. I'll take that over what I thought was happening.
Yep, exactly.
Did you find it hard to adjust your diet?
Yes, I will tell you that at first, but you know what? I'm not a food guy. I'll eat as long as it's in front of me, I'll eat it. I'm really not fancy. So maybe it would affect somebody more who's a big foodie, who really enjoys different tastes of things. For me, I thought it was going to be a nightmare, but like anything in life, once you do it, once you lock in and do it for a month, it just becomes normal.
Yeah. You made me think of the other day. I smoked a turkey breast and I sliced it up and I don't know, I had something else with it. And I ate it for lunch yesterday. And later in the day, Arden said to me, what are you going to have for dinner? I was like, I was just going to eat more of the turkey. I'm with you. Like, I don't need a big presentation or like, I'm just hungry and I need to eat something.
You and me both.
Yeah. That's
That's
interesting.
great.
So you were able to, and it's been 8 years now.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's at least 8, maybe 9. I don't know.
Did the weight stay off or did you put it back?
Well, it did stay off. I got lucky that it stayed off for a little bit, but then once I learned how to eat again, it came back. But then I lost it again, and now I'm at a good place, so I'm happy.
That's excellent, because I find that, you hear people say, oh, there's plenty of gluten-free options, but a lot of times they can be very processed too. And then
and a lot of times they're crazy expensive.
Yep.
Crazy expensive, but yes.
Interesting. Wow, it's amazing. Okay. Any more crazy stories other than fell on your face after being handcuffed, or I mean,
Well, I mean, there's just so many. The thing, well, I'll tell you what, interesting. Just this week, I had a horrible flight back to from my home. I was home visiting, and every time I fly, what I do is I will buy food for the flight crew, and I provide a note, an informational note that just says, "Hey, I'm a T1D," and I do it in a fun way. It's humorous, and I say, "I'm a T1D. I do not drink. I don't take drugs. So if you see me acting like I am drunk or on drugs, I'm probably just having a low blood sugar." And then I tell them, I just say, "Hey, all I need is some Coke." I just say it easy for them. Blah, blah, blah. Give it to me in about 15 minutes. I'll come around. I'll be good. Everything will be good. But I made a mistake this time that I was unaware of. I have Baqsimi. Do you know what that is?
yeah, it's the nasal glucagon.
It's like glucagon. It's inhalable glucagon.
Yep.
And I had some, and it's just like a Frezza, only instead of sucking it in through your mouth, you just blast it into your nose. One blast, like a nasal drops.
Right.
And in the note, I said, "Hey, if I'm blacked out, worst case scenario, which will never happen and never has," I say that 2 or 3 times. All you have to do is squirt this into my nose and I'll be good in 15 minutes. Well, normally I do that when I get on the plane. I carry the food, a little bag of food that I'm giving them with the note, and I hand it to the lead crew member, and they always thank me after post-flight. They're always so wonderful. They say, "Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us, blah, blah, blah." Well, this time I made the mistake and gave it to the gate attendant pre-flight. I looked over and saw her reading the note with a look of concern, and then she called over 2 people, and then there were 5, and they were all reading the note, looking at me like I was some kind of troublemaker. And I was like, "What is going on here?" Well, they had a very large crew member come over and let me know that if something, and in a very pleasant manner, by the way, certainly not negatively, he let me know if anything did happen to me on the flight, they would not be administering the Baqsimi.
Okay.
And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Okay." And I get that. They're not doctors. I totally get it. So we get on the plane, and normally the exact opposite happens. They'll give me a little more attention. I don't like it, but I get it. They're very nice, and they'll just check, and they'll be like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm great. Cool. Thank you." Well, this time I was completely ignored for 6.5 hours. Nobody looked at me. Nobody talked to me. They came by with food. They offered it to my neighbor. They didn't offer it to me. It was very strange. And post-flight, I asked the lead crew member, and I'm like, "Hey, just out of curiosity, what happened? Why did that gentleman tell me they wouldn't administer the medicine if I blacked out?" And he was very cool, again, very nice. He said, "Well, you have to understand, we're not doctors." And I'm like, "No, I get that. I fully understand that." And then this is where it got weird. He's like, "Look, you have to imagine, if you needed help using the toilet, we're not going to help you use the toilet." And automatically, I sound like a nice guy with you. Internally, I get angry pretty easy. And I'm like, "Wait a minute. Are you comparing giving me a blast in my nose to having to help me use the toilet?" And then he equated it also. He's like, "No, we wouldn't do that." He's like, "You should bring an aide with you when you fly if you're going to." And I'm like, "Okay. And yeah, it was rough. And then he said, "Believe me, I understand. I'm just like you. I'm a type 2 too." And I'm like, no, I'm type 1. And he was like, oh, that's serious. And I'm like, yeah. And I mean, they were great. Again, I realized they're not doctors, but I said to him, I'm like, "Well, what if someone's having a heart attack and you give them treatment? That's an emergency situation." And he said, "Yeah, but that's different." And
Wow.
so I didn't want to fight. I just said, okay, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that.
Right.
He was really pleasant.
Yeah. They were just confused. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were confused. They didn't understand. Instead of coming to you and saying, hey, this, they should have had that conversation first with you, not at the end of the flight, at the beginning. And you could have clarified and said, oh no, this is what I meant. Or, you know what I mean? Like put it on yourself a little so they don't get all like, sometimes people get uptight if you feel like you're coming back at them. And you just say, hey, what I meant was I'm not going to pass out. This never happens. But just in case it does, here's an easy way out of this. And that's interesting. How long was the flight? Long, right?
It was super long. It was 6 hours and 20 minutes.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm glad nothing happened. And normally you fly fine usually, right?
Oh, I've never had a problem. I've been flying since I'm 12 years old. It was my first flight. Yeah, I've never had an issue.
Cool. Well, that's amazing. Boom. Maybe I could do an ASMR podcast if this thing ever goes to hell. I just make a bunch of noises into a microphone. Probably not. Hey, contournext.com/juicebox is the place you go to learn about Arden's blood glucose meter. A tiny, easy to hold, easy to see, bright light second chance test strip having blood glucose meter that is super duper accurate. And super duper accurate is a technical term. Look it up. I don't want to get too far off the track here, but after I said that, I Googled super duper accurate because, obviously it's not a real, technical term. But boy, a lot of people have Googled this. Why is that? Super duper accurate. What does super duper accurate mean? Someone actually Googled those words. I think it means you're a moron, listen, we're getting off the beaten path here. But anyway, super duper, this is great. Duper means very, making the super sound even stronger. In this case, it means something absolutely awesomely super accurate. Now, if you can't believe a Google return from 2016, who are you going to believe? Anyway, the Contour Next One blood glucose meter is actually incredibly accurate. It is also easy to hold and easy to use. And to be perfectly honest, without any joking around, it's my favorite blood glucose meter that Arden has ever had. It's just, there's no bull. It really is great. contournext.com/juicebox. You can learn more there, buy it online, see how much the test strips are going to cost you, find out if this stuff is cheaper through cash than it is through your insurance, or if you should just go through your insurance. There's a ton of information there at contournext.com/juicebox. I don't know if me calling it super duper accurate is okay. So let's just, everybody remember I was just joking. It's just super duper in my mind. Technically speaking, I don't know if we can completely trust Isabel 2's response from November 17th, 2016 on the internet, but she seems to know what duper means. I might look up duper at the end of the podcast, see if she was right. Well, I'm sure Omnipod's thrilled about how I went on because now I have to go really fast with their ad. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Head over there right now. See if you're eligible for a free 30-day trial of the Omnipod DASH. I'm going to type it into the machine right now. Omnipod.com/juicebox. All kinds of things going on here, including a photograph of me that I'm not completely comfortable with. But that's just because I don't like the way I look in pictures. Do you think Omnipod's happy now that I've said I have to rush through their ad? Now I'm talking about my feelings about being photographed? Probably not. Omnipod 5 is here, everybody. The first tubeless automated insulin delivery system. Omnipod 5 is the first and only tubeless automated insulin delivery system to integrate with the Dexcom G6, and it's now available for people with type 1 diabetes ages 6 years and older. Their smart adjust technology in the pod, that's where it is, delivers based on your customized target glucose, helping to protect against highs and lows day and night. Check it out at omnipod.com/juicebox. If you don't want automated insulin delivery, get yourself the Omnipod DASH, which, by the way, you may be eligible for a free 30-day trial of. That you can also find out at the link. It's a big purple box that says, "Want to test drive the pod?" ? You can't miss it. Omnipod.com/juicebox. See if you're eligible for that free 30-day trial. I am now contractually obligated to say for full safety, risk information, and free trial terms and conditions, you can also go to omnipod.com/juicebox/juicebox. Whee! Let's get back to the show. You mentioned a couple of different times you've spoken to people who have type 1 diabetes, and I wanted to know more about the importance of finding community, whether it's a person or 10 people or 1,000 people, and how, if it has been helpful to you, how it has been.
It's been pretty wonderful. I'm a pretty private guy. I'm certainly not embarrassed about diabetes, not in any way at all. But I don't lead a conversation with that. Mm-hmm. I don't come in, oh, hey, Scott, I'm Cutter. I'm a diabetic. Yeah, nobody does that. So, but the disease itself, in fact, I even have a hard time calling it a disease. I don't think that it's impairs me, but I know it does. But the hard part about it is that so many people have somebody they know that's a diabetic, but they're often type 2. So there's so much misinformation out there. Nobody really knows about it or understands it, or everybody's got a cousin, by the way. Oh, my cousin's a diabetic and he was treated himself horribly. And you're like, oh, geez, I'm sorry to hear that. Next. So having a community of people you do know that have had shared experiences with you is important. Case in point, have a Facebook group that I belong to that are just dear friends of mine. And we had a posting the other day. I posted a picture of an insulin syringe packet that says single use only. And because so many of us use a needle over and over again, I'm not saying it's healthy, but we all do it. I took a picture of it and just said, hey, does anybody else follow these directions like I do? And I got a lot of replies back saying like, I change my needles once a year. But they were jokes. Right. The next person was like, I use them until they bounce off my arm. And they were just a lot of funny. And I thought about reading that from a non-knowledgeable person's perspective, and they would think, what is happening with these people? Yeah. But we get it because to us, we understand it. So I think having a community of people who understand the things that happen to you is super helpful.
So not having to explain things that you intrinsically understand is just, I would imagine, lightning, right? It takes a weight off.
So much.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. You find these people easier online than in person, or do you have a mix?
Well, these are guys that I know we all went to, it's going to sound funny, but we all went to a diabetic summer camp together. So we've been friends since we're 10 years old. So these are personal friends. They're not people they're not strangers that I met in a support group. And hey, that's great too. I'm fortunate enough to know all these guys personally. So when this is happening or when a phone call is made or whatever, I don't feel embarrassed or weird about talking about it because you've been my friend for 40 years.
I was going to say, how long have you, when was that summer camp?
For me, I went when I was 7 years old, my first summer. So that was 75.
Wow. You still know those guys.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Isn't that crazy? That's amazing.
Yeah, actually. It's great. It's like college, but yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. I know there are people who absolutely adore diabetes camp. It's just, the people it's right for, it's really, really right for. We've mentioned it to my daughter a couple of times. She looks at us like we're crazy. So I think, but I think if I asked her to go to a camp for anything, she'd look at the same. I don't think it has anything to do with it being diabetes. I think she's not a camp person, but I've heard so many great stories from people who have had just experiences like yours, just lifelong, amazing experiences.
Well, and keep in mind too, when I was 7, I didn't have a choice. It was my parents saying, we think this would be great for you. And I had my homesick and I probably had that, 3 days in. And then once that third day was over, every summer for the next, I don't even know how long I went. I probably went 8 or 9 years. I really looked forward to it. So It was a lot of fun for me.
Can I ask you a question disconnected from diabetes? Why are you so good at this?
I'm sorry?
You're very good at this. Why are you so good at this? Why are you there's no pauses. You have your thoughts. You're you're building your thoughts as you're talking. You're good in the conversation. Like there's no weird pauses. Like, do you do something like this for a living or as a hobby or something like that?
No, I just have a real big mouth and you can't shut me up. So you're on the positive side of it. I'm sure if we were talking about something you didn't care about, you'd be thinking, oh, will you please just shut the F up?
I've just been really, I mean, there are times when people pause or they consider their thoughts for a second, but you've been clear. And even when you've gone down sort of a flight of fancy during a conversation, you come back to the question every time. You don't get lost. And I just thought maybe you did this or spoke to people for a living or something like that, but you should.
No, I don't. Thank you. That's very kind to hear. I appreciate that.
No,
thank you.
That's amazing. I just, communicating like this is not natural to begin with. So, we don't see each other and, just you're perfect on the pauses and everything. I'm not stepping on you. You're not stepping on me. It's been very pleasurable talking to you.
Thank you. Wow, that's a nice thing. you might be the first one to say that. Thank you.
You're saying if we met somewhere else and start talking about
I'm that
different.
guy. I'm that guy. You're sitting in the next booth at the restaurant and you're like, oh, Jesus. So, yeah.
We're going to have to move, honey. This guy's not going to stop.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. You live by yourself?
I do.
Okay. Does anyone follow your Dexcom? Anyone in your life?
I don't have a Dexcom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Libre?
I have Freestyle.
Okay.
I use a Freestyle sensor. I still inject and use the Afrezza, but my physician follows all that stuff. I don't have I don't have a tandem person like a mate or a friend that follows that stuff. I'm sure I could share that with any of my friends. It's just not something that I have ever done.
I don't know how Libre works, so I'm not certain that you could or you couldn't, but I was just trying to get at what it's like to live alone with diabetes. Is it frightening ever?
It's not frightening. It's weird. I have had some super lows where getting to the fridge, and any T1D, I think, will have had this experience, sadly, or I should say anybody my age that's older.
Yeah.
Getting from the bedroom to the refrigerator that might be 15, 20 feet away when you're unable to walk it can be a bit scary. Mm-hmm. And that has been. So that's been a nightmare at a few times. And again, dramatic when I say nightmare, but it's pretty scary when you're, 6 feet away from the fridge and you don't know if you can make it. That's a little bit scary.
Yeah. And there's no one else there.
No, and you're crawling on your belly. I don't say that for pity. I'm just saying it's a reality, and it doesn't happen often. That's a very, it's only happened to me once, to tell you the honest truth. But it was, and then when you do grab the bottle of whatever you have in your fridge, trying to get it unscrewed and into your mouth, so 80% of it goes on the floor as opposed to into your body, that gets weird.
Yeah, I can't imagine actually. Has it ever been an issue for you at your job?
One time one time I did pass out at a job that I was working at. Oh, I'll give you a good one. When I was 18 years old, I moved out to California and I wanted to work at Disney. And I went there to try to become a character. Now, this is great. It's hilarious in hindsight. I got super low, so low that I knew I needed to treat it. So I got up and I went to look for a Coke machine. And next thing I knew, I woke up on my back, and I'm not kidding you, Snow White and 3 of the dwarves in costume are leaning over me. So when my eyes, and an EMT was there putting sugar into me. But so when I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Snow White and 3 dwarfs. And it's one of the funniest stories that I have. So yeah, it was crazy.
Well, they could have just kept you a little low and made you goofy. You would have been fine. Just,
absolutely.
Just the 52 blood sugar and send Cutter out there. He's going to be perfect. That's Crazy. My gosh. I have to ask you, so because you're coming from a different perspective, you know, how do I mean this? I find very
Say
often,
it.
well, I'm trying to figure it out. I find very often that people who've had diabetes for a very long time had different expectations and goals. And now that now that technology has improved, it's hard to shift. And so like, I'm not, obviously not judging you about like having frequent lows, but I wonder why they happen. And if you're not able to do something to stop them or have you tried and it hasn't worked? And there's a lot in there, but somewhere.
No.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there, and it is an incredibly valid question. And I will give you the honest truth. The reason that I have had so many lows and the reason that they've been bad is that I'm an idiot. And I will often get, and again, I use these words like often. I'm telling you 3 stories that sound dramatic, but keep in mind that's over 51 years.
No, yeah, I understand.
But when I have had a major incident like that, it's due to ill preparation. Now I always have food on me. Mm-hmm. Always. I don't care if I'm walking across the street, I'll have something on me just in case. Yeah. That took a long time to get there. I always assumed that food was 2 minutes away.
Okay.
And so I have learned to always carry sugar. When I was a kid, we carried sugar cubes, but I'll carry glucose tablets or whatever I have. So now I always have something with me.
Jenny told me yesterday she used to have raisins in her pockets when she was a kid.
Yeah.
So you're telling a bigger story and trying to, it's spread out over decades. Do you think that it was experience that made you carry stuff with you nowadays, or was it maturity? Like, were you resistant to, like, did it, you don't seem like the kind of person who would just be like, I'm not carrying this because I don't want to look like I have type 1. I don't see you as being that person.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it was just absent-mindedness. Again, I don't think of myself as a T1D. The first thought when I think about myself is not I'm a diabetic, because it's just part of my life. So unfortunately, in the past, when I was younger, again, using that example, I always thought food would be 2 minutes away. And now I've just learned, you wake up on the sidewalk a couple times and you're like, maybe it's time to start carrying a power bar. So it just makes life a little bit easier.
What are your A1C goals right now? Like, what do you shoot for?
Well, obviously we all want to be at 5.5, but that's not happening. Right now, I'm currently at about 7. Now, I spent a lot of my life a lot higher than that. Mm-hmm. So what I'm looking to get at to now would be 6, and that would be perfect for me. But I know my limitations, and I think I would be okay with 6.5.
What do you think stops it from being a 6?
The lifetime of non-discipline, really. I am late to the game in treating it seriously. And when I say seriously, I've always been aware of the effects. I'm not saying that I didn't think it mattered. What I mean is when you're young, you're going to live forever and you're Superman. And it's only when you get a little bit older and you look back and you see how bad your dad was the last 9 years of your life that you realize you're mortal and you realize, oh, I need to pick up my game.
Yeah.
So that's where it is for me.
Sort of like no one bag of potato chips feels like it's going to be the end of your health. It's the culmination and you don't keep track of the culminating happening. Okay. So I guess I've been wondering this since we started talking, really. Like, how did you find me? Do you listen to the show?
I do listen to the show, and to tell you quite frankly, one of my very good lifelong diabetic friends was a guest on your show.
Oh, okay. Are you able to say who it is?
I can say his name is Thomas Casey, and Tom is a really good friend of mine, and I think he recorded with you sometime, maybe this summer. I'm not certain.
Oh, so it's possible his episode's not even up yet.
I don't think it has aired yet.
Oh, no kidding. So he told you about the show, and because it's interesting that, well, it's not, I guess I'm wrong. I'm about to say something about my own podcast. It's not right. But I think I think of the show as management related in my mind, but I think it's as much, if not more, community oriented than that, honestly. So I'm guessing, enjoy hearing the stories from people more than you would say go back and listen to like the pro tip episodes about management. Is that right?
Exactly. And so you're aware too, I had heard the podcast before. I had heard it. I don't know. I'd probably listened to 3 or 4 episodes, and because I had mentioned it to him, and that's when he told me that he was going to be a guest.
Oh, no kidding.
I was not a religious listener, but after he talked to me about it, that was when I submitted you the email just saying I had a pretty unique experience involving law enforcement.
Yeah, no, you certainly did. I mean, your experience in general is unique. It's not, I mean, if you don't tell the story about law enforcement, to be honest with you, I still think you're the right person to be on this podcast, for certain. Okay, well, that's interesting. So if I told you that I think there are 20 episodes of this podcast that if you listen to, your A1C would come into the 6s easily, would you be willing to listen to it? Or does that feel odd to you? Does it feel odd to listen to a person who, I don't have diabetes, Cutter, and so like, would that rub you the wrong way?
Oh yeah, that would be terrible. Listening to something about how to get my A1C to 6. Yeah. Well, what are you doing?
No, I mean,
no, yeah, no. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I will tell you that for me as a listener, and I'm certainly not speaking for everybody, I am still very intimidated by the science of T1D. I am not good with it, and I never have been. I understand the basics. But when I'm listening to something that's presented in a very clinical way, I tune out quickly. The reason that I love your podcast is because oftentimes I hear stories that I associate with. It's just that when the tech part of it comes in, that's when I feel like a dummy, to tell you the truth. I know that's an off-color word, but yeah. So if you have podcasts that are easy to understand and don't threaten the listener with tech speak, that would work perfectly for me. But I understand I'm in the minority there.
Okay. So this is super interesting to me because that's what that stuff is. I mean, so what you don't know about me, maybe, interestingly enough, but it's so interesting to me that the podcast is sort of, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, that it has so many episodes at this point that there are almost podcasts within the podcast. Like there's, you know what I mean? Like there are series and ideas. Like there's a way for you to listen to certain episodes and think that I'm some sort of a insulin genius. And there's a way for you to listen to certain episodes and think this guy's he's just conversational, just talking to people. And if you don't intersect with all of it, you wouldn't really know. So let me give you a tiny bit of background. I'm bad at math. When my daughter was given, her diagnosis, I was a stay-at-home dad, and I was fairly certain I was going to kill her. And in the first couple of years, I was probably well on my way to accomplishing that. Her A1C was like, in the mid-8s. I had no idea what I was doing. There was no good technology. I was using a meter and some needles, basically. And I began to write a blog in 2007, maybe.
Yeah, I know about this.
Okay. And then I started building ideas, and one day I just was like, well, I have a system here. Like I haven't quantified it at all, but I know there are steps that I take every day and they lead to these outcomes. As I got her 8 to a 7 or 7 to a 6 or 6 into the 5s, and then one day I was just like, I started writing about them kind of to clarify them for myself, I think. And then the podcast began in 2015, and by 2019, we were doing these things called pro tip episodes, where me and my friend Jenny, who's had diabetes, like I said earlier, for 33 years, she helped me take all the ideas that I had kind of figured my way through over the years. And I said to her, I'm like, I want to put each idea into an episode. And I chose her because she's she thinks about diabetes the way I do, like the management of it the way I do, but she comes from a different perspective. She's got type 1 for decades. She's a nutritionist. She's a diabetes nurse practitioner. Like, you know, she has that kind of technical vibe, but nothing about the way she talks about it is technical. And I have no ability to speak about it technically. Like, Cutter, seriously, I make the same joke over and over again. I don't know what I can't even say that word. Postprandial, like whatever that word is that your endocrinologist throws at you about your blood sugars after you've eaten or whatever the hell it means. I can't say it. I couldn't define it for you. And my daughter's A1C is between 5.2 and 6.2 for 8 years.
Wait, so you mean the terms that my endo gives me that I nod my head like I know what she's saying?
Yes. Like when they say that the glycemic load and the glycemic index of your food is very important, and you're like, oh, yeah, of course it is. Yeah. You're like, lady, 30 years ago, I wanted to be dopey. All right. I'm not following you. So I would tell you that if you listen to those pro tip episodes and your A1C doesn't end up in the sixes, based on just the conversation I'm having with you today, I'd be surprised by that. And I bet geez, that's great. I bet you would literally happen in 3 months.
Let me tell you, I saw the clip or the episode. I don't know when your daughter had her low, and boy, that was, you had a video where you treated her at a really, really, really young age when she was low, correct?
Oh my gosh, that's from a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, and let me tell you something. I want to thank you for that in a very odd way, because my parents got divorced when I was 6. And so they were still married, but my dad worked during the day. And I had never thought about what a challenge that must have been on my mom when I was a little kid, and I was your daughter's age. And that made me give her a call and just say, hey, thank you. Oh. I always took it for granted. So being that you had to deal with that says a lot. And I'm not praising you to praise you. I'm saying it says a lot about you and my mom and any parent out there that has to deal with something like that. With how do you deal with that with a 3-year-old? It must just tear your heart out. So thank you for putting in that time.
It really does rip at you. I appreciate that. It's funny. I don't even know where to find that video at this point. But hold on one second. So dry in here. So what had happened was she had a seizure and from a low blood sugar. And one day we had a video camera set up for something completely different. And she just started talking about the seizure. And I just let her go. And her descriptions were really interesting. My eyes saw colors because she was really little. I felt like a monster. I think that's because she was grunting. She couldn't speak anymore. It was just interesting to hear her pick through what she could make sense of from that experience. And like I said, honestly, there was just a video camera there and she started talking about it. And I just pushed record. It wasn't. Well,
thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that, because I have to honestly tell you, all I was thinking, and in the video that I watched, I don't know if it's the same one. Are you offering her pancakes or something?
Oh, maybe that's a different one.
I think it's a different one because she's actually having the low. And you are trying to treat her with it, treat her through it, I should say.
You are.
I think you might have you tried to get her to eat pancakes or maple syrup, something and she didn't want any part of anything, like a diabetic often gets when they're super low.
Yeah.
And you were really, really, really super great about it. And then you did get her through it. And you're doing, I think if my memory is correct, you were doing a blood while you were feeding her. And it was, it's a juggling act for moms and dads.
Yeah, I do remember that. The trying to like get her to eat and test her blood sugar at the same time, because you're testing her blood sugar, just trying to, like, back then without all the technology, you're just looking for any indication that this is either holding tight or moving in your direction or going the wrong way and you need more. Because even in those panic situations, I was still trying to be cognizant of not over correcting her, because it's so hard to even fathom starting over again. and just, like turning this low into a high, and then this is all going to happen again. So you're trying not to let her die, and you're trying not to make her blood sugar 300 at the same time with the meter I used to have, it's like I came out of a bubblegum machine. You know what I mean? It's probably crap, and you're just like, oh, whatever the number is, you test, you're like, 48. And the next one, like 3 seconds later, you try so hard to wait a couple of minutes because the anxiety is crazy. And then you test again, you're like 52. Like, oh, is that okay? Good. Like now I'll wait 4 minutes before I check again. Like you'd check a blood sugar 5-6 times in the middle of a low just to make sure. I don't know. Like I haven't tried the inhalable insulin, but I'll tell you right now that CGM for my money is the best thing that's ever happened. So.
And just to backtrack a little bit, when I was a kid, you talked about all the advances we've made over the years. When I was probably, I was probably 12 or something. And I said to my dad, I had just come from diabetic summer camp. And I said, oh, this is amazing. Technology being what it is. I think it was 1980. And, oh, man, they're probably going to find a cure for this in the next 10 years. And my dad just kind of grinned at me, and I'm like, what's up? And he said, they're never going to find a cure for this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm thinking, he's crazy. He doesn't know anything. And he said, well, they make too much money treating it. And at the time I thought he was crazy and insane, but now many, many, many years later, and I don't want to get into a political, that's not what I'm saying. Sure. But what I'm saying is now as an adult, I kind of understand that.
The idea that he just that feeling of why would anybody make their revenue stream go away?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I love it. But I'm fortunate enough that I have access to this stuff. Not everybody does.
Yeah.
And so that's all I mean to say about that. You're fine. I don't think we'll ever see a cure in my time. I just don't.
So I have two thoughts about that. My first one is the people who are scientists that are, I'm imagining, working on curing all kinds of things. They're not in the same revenue stream as the person who's selling you, the supplies. And so that makes me feel good. I also think that it's impossible to keep a conspiracy quiet in a world this big. So if somebody has has the formula folded up in their pocket and doesn't want to share it with us, that would surprise me too. But, to your point, I don't think a company that's making needles is going to suddenly open up an arm to try to cure diabetes either. You know what I mean? And maybe they will. Maybe I'll be surprised. The bigger issue to me is that, as a species, as humans, I don't think we've really cured very much. It's not like curing things is super simple to do. And I do think that people's idea of a cure is I take a pill or a shot and then I don't have diabetes anymore. And our technology and science is nowhere near that. You know what I mean? So if they come up with glucose sensing technology, or, I don't know, if they think they can one day insert a packet of cells inside of you that don't need immunosuppressant drugs, cool. Let me say it. You know what I mean? But I keep it very simple. I live and think like a cure could never happen, but I am always very hopeful about it. So I don't lose my hope, but I try to stay, what I consider to be common sense reasonable about the Herculean effort it would take to actually cure a disease.
And you know what? Thank you for making that statement, because that you've just turned me. I know I sounded like Mel Gibson in Conspiracy Theory at the top there, and I'm not that guy, but that analogy that you just made is actually pretty great. And thank you for making that, because you're right. It's not like they've cured 400 other diseases and they're just holding back on T1D. You are so right about that. We haven't been able to, we cured polio because that was a right now thing that was happening. I get that. But we don't have the technology yet to cure all of these things. So thank you. You've put that in a great new perspective for me.
No, I appreciate it's just always how I've kind of wrapped my head around it. Here's a short list just from a Google search the Google search diseases cured by humans. It comes up and says successfully eradicated human diseases. Smallpox. Wow. Poliomyelitis caused by wild poliovirus types 2 and 3. So good luck. I don't know what that is. Polio. Dracunculiasis. Yaws. Malaria. What the heck is this one?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, this got maybe nothing to do with what we're talking about, but if we don't try to figure out what DRACUNCULIASIS is,
why are you so dumb? Everybody knows that's Travatigen.
Yeah. So, even the way they break it down to make it easier is no help. So the word, okay. Let's just say whatever let's call it Dracula. Dracula,
okay.
Also called guinea worm disease, is a parasite infection by the guinea worm, Dracula mendinis. Oh my God. A person becomes infected from drinking water that contains water fleas infected with guinea worm larvae and ingested. Okay, this is one of the things that we've eradicated. Like, they didn't, smallpox. They didn't go into your body and because here's the problem, right? You have a two-step issue. You think of, and most people think top line, my pancreas isn't making insulin. That's my problem. Your problem is that your autoimmune system killed, or shut down your pancreas. Didn't kill it. It's still doing a lot of things. Actually, it's just not making insulin. And can you A, turn that production back on, and B, stop your body from just reattacking it again? Like, these are not like, oh, there's a virus and we can make a vaccine to stop it from making you sick, or, we have smallpox here and we know how to it's not the same thing. And so I don't know, man. If you ask me, if you put me in a bar and we had $50 and you put it in the middle of the bar and you're like, there's a right answer to this, are they going to cure diabetes or not? I'd bet no. If you put me in that position, if you asked me to, give up $50 to feel hopeful for my whole life, I could do that too. It's just a very interesting. What's interesting is what we consider a cure versus what the reasonable possibility is to do that with current technology. And that's, there's a gentleman that was on here this year whose company is trying to make a drug, just a vaccine for hand, foot, mouth disease. Hand, foot, mouth. It's, hold on a second. My daughter had this right before she was diagnosed. So it's they commonly call it hand, foot, mouth. And you get these little spots all over you, a rash on your hands and feet and mouth. But for some reason, a lot of people are diagnosed with diabetes afterwards. So we've always just kind of simply thought of it as my daughter got this thing, and then her body got confused and, attacked her pancreas instead of the hand, foot, mouth. And for some reason, I can't think. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I can't for the life of me. Oh God, this word that I know so well just fell out of my head. It's Coxsackie virus. So the guy said, look, if so many people's diagnosis precedes Coxsackie virus, what if we could make a vaccine for Coxsackie virus? If fewer people got Coxsackie, then stands to reason that fewer people might develop type 1 diabetes. That's the kind of thinking that I'm encouraged by,
Oh, and that's a scientific guy. That's a thought. I mean, that's wonderful. And I think again, I'm regretting everything that I said earlier.
You shouldn't.
I don't ever mean it as a big conspiracy to hurt people. I don't mean it that way. I just mean from a profit center, it certainly doesn't hurt you to have this thing to treat. But when I hear about that, all of the scientific people I think they would all love to, who doesn't want to help people? That's what I think it is. Yeah.
There's a bigger thing in there. There are some people who are researchers and they just wanted research for the rest of their life. They're not, there's all kinds of aspects of this conversation that you can't have in just an hour, honestly. But I mean, I take your point. It's not wrong. If I make fingernail cutters, I'm not going to want to come up with a shot that makes people's fingernails stop growing, like makes someone else might want to do that, but that's not going to be my main focus. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I would never, if you think about insulin pumps, glucose sensing technology, better insulin, sharper needles. You know what I mean? Needles that can be disposed of. All of these things make people's lives better if they use insulin. So I'm glad it exists. Sometimes you hear people say like, oh, that company makes too much money. And I was like, look, you may be right. That's a different conversation. I'm happy they exist. Whatever keeps them getting up and going to work in the morning is good with me. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see what they come up with next. I'm a bit
after this inhalable insulin. I honestly believe in magic now.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
No kidding. I can't agree with you enough. Like, we're just at, I don't know how to put it. Like, it feels like we're just at the precipice of all this. Like, the diabetes is still type 1 diabetes is still a very new thing. I mean, honestly, Cutter, you're born in 71.
No, 68.
Excuse me, 68. The math on this, just vaguely, if you were born in 1920, you're probably dead, right?
Yeah.
You don't make it at all because there's no insulin. So that's only 100 years ago now. I'm 100% right. So 2021 is the 100-year anniversary of insulin.
Yeah, you're right.
Am I right? Okay.
Yeah.
So listen, 105 years ago, people were born, they developed type 1 diabetes, and then they were gone. And I think the Egyptians used to call it, they had some phrase that meant that you urinated yourself to death. That's
oh, wow.
There's historians who think that was type 1 diabetes, the idea that people used to urinate themselves to death, because that's the only cause and effect they could see back then. Anyway, it doesn't help anybody.
Well, did they get help, though? Did they get help from the UFOs?
No, the UFOs did not help them. They just kept building the pyramids, and they didn't even stop to help.
Bastards.
Yeah. I mean, you're there in your flying saucer, and you can't just be a little helpful. I mean, you just use the laser gun they gave Dr. Spock, right? And it just, or no, Bones. It was Bones. Damn it, I ruined my own analogy.
It's all good.
Yeah, you just wave it over top of them and make their pancreas work again. But no. They were busy building a pyramid. I'll tell you right now, I could spend the rest of my life being amazed that, I mean, how would a human being cut that stone even? You know what I mean? How do you cut the stone? How do you move it? How do you stack it? How do you people are, I mean, maybe that's the message really, is that if human beings can, without tools that we would think of as anywhere near modern, could fashion a stone into a certain shape and stack it up into a pyramid, maybe we can figure out how to cure a disease one day. I just think it's going to take more time than, a person in this moment would care to think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that we're past the hour, but let me just say that for me, as somebody and thank you very much. Hold on, let me give you a beat. For me, I just want to wrap it up with saying thank you very much for giving me this platform to talk to you. I never get the chance to talk about this stuff, and it's really pretty wonderful. And I have always said, from my perspective, I won the lottery. When diagnosed, and I always say too, if you're going to pick a disease to have to live with, I don't know if there's a better one to pick than T1D. The problems that can happen to you are pretty horrendous. I saw my dad go through a really, really, really rough 9 years, but now we know that these things happen and we can avoid them from happening and live completely normal lives. So as far as getting a disease goes, I think that T1D, from my perspective, is the number one, is the one to get, that if you're going to get anything.
It's the best time in the human history to have type 1 diabetes, which
awesome.
It's not saying a whole lot, but but it really is. And I appreciate your perspective. I'll tell you, and I'll let you go, Cutter, that I would rather talk to you or someone like you than any person who, I don't know, makes their living talking about diabetes, or, works somewhere, or I don't know. I just think there's more value in letting you just unfold and unpack your story, especially as you've just kind of acknowledged that it's not something where there are a lot of places to do something like that. And you have specific thoughts and perspectives that are valuable for other people living with type 1 to hear. I think they're valuable for people who need insulin to hear, honestly. But that is maybe one of the points of pride I have about the podcast is not that it exists, but that it reaches so far and wide and allows your story from wherever you're sitting right now to be something that anyone can access. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and do all this.
Oh, no, I appreciate being able to do it. And thank you so much for that. And if you're ever bored or whatever, do not hesitate to send an email or whatever.
Thank you. Hey, if you want to be on again, book now and I can have you on 7 months from now. My schedule is, I'm just kidding. My schedule is a mess. I just had somebody say to me, I just took it's December now, 2021. And I just had somebody book in September of 2022. I think that was like the next availability I had. So
I had to move. I was originally scheduled with you in July and I had to cancel it due to a work obligation. And the next available window was today. So yeah, it's amazing that you have the amount of, let me ask you, I don't want to bore you, but this has become such a big deal for you, I imagine. You must have times where you're like, oh, Jesus, I don't want to do another one. Well, how do you deal with that?
Oh, I like to talk, and I find people very interesting. So the recordings are not, I've never had an issue making a recording. Even when, like, I've gotten on with people who I don't like, I wouldn't personally get on with, and I still have a great time talking to them. There are moments when the editing becomes arduous. That's the part that sometimes can, like, get me. But people are like, well, pay somebody to do the editing. Well, first of all, that's easy for you to say. It's expensive. And, but also I think there's an aesthetic that I have. Like, I think part of the reason why the podcast works is because of the way I envision it. And I don't know that I could teach that to someone else. So there are times when I will, so to give you an idea, the podcast comes out 4 times a week. So I record at least 3 times a week. And then in my off moments, like, so I'll record your episode today. Your episode will go onto a hard drive. It'll be backed up, redundancy about 1,000 times, so I can't lose it. And then I'm going to go eat breakfast or lunch or whatever time it is. And then I'll come back up here today and I will listen through as many episodes as I can get through today, taking out noise, and some people click their tongues after every sentence, like stuff like that I find irritating that I wouldn't want to listen to. I clean it up for sound. I don't clean them up for content. I don't think I've ever chopped anything out of one of these episodes. With the, like every once in a while somebody will say something and they're like, wow, that's too personal. Don't put that in there. But it's not like they egregiously say something crazy and I'm like, oh, I don't want to have this person be known as, like, you know what I mean? Like, no one's ever come out for the Nazi party in the middle of it. And then I've been like, no, we'll just chop that part out. Like, that stuff like that doesn't happen is what I'm saying. And then,
well, for people that don't know, that have never edited anything in audio, that's a real simple process that only takes about 15 seconds, right?
Oh, sure. No. Yeah. So it takes longer to edit the show than it does to record it.
Yep.
And then I have to put it aside again until I'm ready to put it up. So I basically, I probably have about 60 raw edited files. I try to have 10 that are edited down for like sound. And then I have to come back every week and put in the ads and the bumpers and all of that into the edited ones. Then I have to move them online, set them up so that when you open up your app, they have a title and that stuff. It's painful. Then I have to support it with social media and the whole time I'm still making more. So while I'm talking to you, I'm editing shows that I recorded 6 months ago. And it's, I don't dislike any of it. I really do. I can't imagine. Think about it. Like, I make a living, I help people, and I enjoy this.
And that's the key right there is that you enjoy it, because if, it's an old saying and it sounds like a cliche, but if you love what you're doing, it's not work. And what you were saying about hiring an editor doesn't have the feel for the pieces that you do because it's a personal thing for you. So I applaud you for that. That's why they come out good.
I appreciate that. In my mind, each episode is a narrative, and when you pile them all together into the podcast, there's a narrative there as well. So I think of however many episodes there are now. I think maybe 594 went up today, like number 594. And I think of them almost as an organism. Honestly, I think the episodes are pieces of a bigger thing, and that you can enjoy them a la carte. But if you listen to all of them, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think if somebody started listening to this podcast at number 1 and somehow listened to all through 594 of them, I think their A1C is in the 5s. I think their stress is lower. I think the amount of time they think about diabetes goes down. And I think their mental health around it would be calm. Or at least you'd have that possibility at the very least. And so that's my goal, and like my big overarching goal. I'm proud of it.
Well, I'll tell you, where can I find you social media wise?
There is a private Facebook group that has 18,000 listeners in it. It's called Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. That's where you'll find me mostly. There's a public group where I just post new episodes, and I do kind of the same thing on Instagram. I'm not very active there. Although there's a fairly big following for the podcast on Instagram, but I just kind of, I don't know, I pop in once in a while. You're more likely to see a picture of like a flower that I see outside than something about diabetes. But yeah, I think that Facebook group is the place to be. I'm astonished by how un-Facebook my Facebook group is. And I think that has something to do with the fact that it is mostly stocked with people who listen to the podcast. It grows, and people come in from the outside who are used to being, not kind to people or judgmental or whatever. And those people either see that this place is not for them and leave, or I've seen a lot of people start off kind of gruff and end up being really important parts of the group. So I think everybody deserves the chance to have a conversation with another person living their life like them. And maybe just not everybody's ready to have it right away. So it takes some compassion and patience on the side of people who are already in that place to help other people get there. And I don't know, like I can't believe I'm saying that I think my Facebook page is an accomplishment, but I do. So there you go.
Listen, if you have 18,000 people going there, that's not your mom and your best friend from high school. You know what I mean? That's reaching people. So you're doing a great job. And in closing, I would just say, I think maybe, and if you already have, I apologize. Maybe if you put up a posting there, and I'm certainly going to go and join right after this, if you have those 10 videos or podcasts that you recommend to lower your A1C, I would certainly love reading something like that.
It's all there, Cutter. Don't worry.
Great.
There are lists, and there is a wonderful woman named Isabel who helps me with the podcast in Facebook, and she's got lists and graphics, and she's done way more online with my information than I ever had the time to. So you'll find it when you get there. It's called Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. You'll answer a couple of questions just to prove you're a real person, and it'll let you through. Really
awesome. And to anybody out there that is a T1D that is afraid of coming on this show because of your lack of education about diabetes, like I often feel, I can tell you that was my biggest hurdle coming into this episode today, and it went away after about 30 seconds. So don't be afraid here. It's a good time.
I appreciate that, man, very much. I hope you have a great day.
You too. You are fantastic, sir.
Back at you. Hi, just the door, Cutter, and I hope you enjoyed him as well. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Cutter, and sharing your story with us. Thanks also to Omnipod, makers of the Omnipod DASH and the Omnipod 5. Head over to omnipod.com/juicebox or use the links in the show notes or the ones at juiceboxpodcast.com. Right now, go, go, go. And don't forget that you deserve an accurate blood glucose meter. contournext.com/juicebox. It's the easiest decision you're going to make today is to get the Contour Next one. While you're out on that internet, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Take the survey. Fewer than 10 minutes. Help me out. Help people with type 1 diabetes. If you're enjoying the podcast, please, please, please subscribe or follow in a podcast app like Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, audio apps. Go into it, search the show up, and then hit follow or subscribe, depending on what the options are in the app you're listening in. There's a ton of other podcast apps. Like, say you're like one of those people that's like, but Scott, I listen in Overcast. It's fine with me. Listen wherever you want. By the way, podcast apps should be free. You shouldn't have to pay for them. But following and subscribing, that's the key to supporting the show. And then if you want to go a little farther, tell someone else about it. That's really how the show grows. And speaking about growing, here's a little something you might not know. You want to know something cool? Hold on, I'm going to tell you something cool. Hold on 1 second. Let me pull up the numbers so you can see it. And then we're going to look up the word Duper. Okay, so when I tell you to share the show with somebody if you're enjoying it, here's why. Because it grows exponentially when that happens. And if you need proof, here's some proof. If 2022 continues on at the pace it's at, there will be more downloads or streams. Streaming, and people get confused sometimes. Whether you download the show into your app or if you stream it through the app, it's the same thing. A listen, let's call it. There will be more listens inside of the calendar year 2022 than the show had in its complete history prior to 2022. So be clear about what I'm saying. Because of the way you guys listen and share, 2022 should have more listens than 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 combined. This year, stronger than the previous 7 years combined. And make no mistake why that is. It's because you listen, you subscribe, and you share. For that, you have my utmost gratitude and thanks. I really do appreciate it. Now let's figure out about Duper. Now, turns out Duper is a real word, but it says a person who deceives or tricks someone. So that's not what we mean. So now we go down to Super Duper at Webster's. Okay. Definition of Super Duper: of the greatest excellence, size, effectiveness, or impressiveness. Now here's the thing. Does no one know what Super Duper means? Does it have to be... I mean, I was just kidding earlier about it being a technical term, but real quick before I go, let's find out how the, give him a little shout out here. How does the dictionary say Super Duper? You ready?
Super duper.
Hold on.
Super duper.
It sounds like it's saying pooper duper.
Super duper.
Why is it doing that? Pooper duper, super duper.
Super duper.
It's still saying pooper duper. All right, hold on a second. Oh God, if I do this for 5 more minutes, I'm going to call this episode pooper duper.
Super duper.
That's better. The Merriam-Webster website did a good job with it. The other one is Google. Listen to what Google says.
Super duper.
That time it got it right. Interesting. Okay, hold on. So Google.
Super duper.
Ah, there it did it again. Pooper duper. And then Merriam-Webster. What do you mean subscribe? I'm not subscribing. Stop it. I'm not subscribing. After I just asked you guys to subscribe to the podcast, I'm like, I ain't subscribing to crap. Hold on a second. This is Webster's.
Super duper.
I don't know. Which one do you like better? I wonder if there's other ones. Here's a Cambridge dictionary. Think it'll be British?
Super duper.
Oh, wait, that was the US version. Oh, it does have a UK version.
Super duper.
Ah, super duper. Let's do that one again.
Super duper.
This is interesting. Why do they all have... Here's Collins dictionary.
Super duper.
Ooh, that sounded like a bad guy in like a Marvel movie.
Super duper.
What does super duper mean? Yourdictionary.com. Nope. Oh.
Super duper.
This podcast is over, by the way. You can stop whenever you want.
Super duper.
That was Wiktionary, which I didn't know was a thing, but I'm not stopping. Now, idioms, the free dictionary. No. Oh, spend some money, idioms. Get yourself a pronunciation. Macmillan Dictionary. You guys know dictionaries used to be books, right? Here we go.
Super Duper.
That was upbeat. One more time for that one.
Super Duper.
Yeah, that was super duper Macmillan. I'm going to the second page of results because I'm not done yet. The Urban Dictionary. You know it means something totally dirty and nasty in the Urban Dictionary. Oh, no, it doesn't. But the description is dirty. Okay, hold on a second. Yeah, there's no little talkie button. Talkie button. Talkie button. That's actually what came up in my head. Thesaurus.com. Want to hear some synonyms for super duper? We're way off the track by now, but let's not stop. Attractive, valuable, wonderful, commendable, excellent, exquisite, great, laudable, praiseworthy, unreal. Wow, look at that. Super duper. All this because I like the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. And by the way, people at Contour, this is basically an ad right now. So, I mean, you're welcome. What else here? Dictionary.reverso.net. That can't be a real thing. What does that mean? Oh, I see. You could, it'll like swap it to different languages. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I have much use for that, but that's okay. Hold on. Is there something online that can just talk? Like, let's see. Make my words audio. Well, that's the worst Google ever, but Speechify. It's an ad, so careful. So if let's see. It says paste. Okay. Oh, what do I usually say at the end of the episode? Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Ready?
Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.
We should make this thing curse before we go. Hold on a second. It's just saying. Hold on a second. Why won't it say the whole thing? It won't say the whole thing. Hold on, let's edit it and try again. Here. Okay, here.
Super duper mother.
There we go.